They built this jail for order. What they created, instead, was a pressure cooker. Thousands of human beings stacked on top of each other, locked behind concrete and steel, where time stretches, tempers explode, and survival becomes a daily negotiation. This is Twin Towers Jail in Los Angeles, where overcrowding doesn't just break the system, it breaks people. Once you enter, the building doesn't feel like a jail. It feels like something alive, breathing, watching, waiting. They built this jail for order. What they created instead was a pressure cooker. Thousands of human beings stacked on top of each other, locked behind concrete and steel, where time stretches, tempers explode, and survival becomes a daily negotiation. This is Twin Towers Jail in Los Angeles, where overcrowding doesn't just break the system, it breaks people. Once you enter, the building doesn't feel like a jail. It feels like something alive, breathing, watching, waiting. Twin Towers Correctional Facility rises from downtown Los Angeles like a concrete monument to ambition and failure. From the outside, it looks massive, almost indestructible. Two towering blocks of reinforced concrete, designed to handle the growing demands of the largest jail system in the United States. When it opened in the late 1990s, officials called it a solution, a modern replacement, a step forward. Inside the walls, they promised better classification, improved security, and humane conditions. On paper, it was progress. In reality, it was the beginning of a slow collapse. Twin Towers was built to hold roughly 3,000 inmates. That number was already ambitious. But Los Angeles County did not slow down. Arrests continued. Courts moved slowly. Mental health facilities closed. The jail became the default holding place for people the city did not know what to do with. Within a few years, the population doubled. Then it pushed past its limits again. Cells designed for one person now held two, sometimes three. Day rooms became sleeping areas. Hallways filled with mattresses. Privacy disappeared. Space became a luxury. Overcrowding in a jail is not just about numbers. It changes everything. When too many bodies are locked into a space designed for far fewer, the air feels different. Noise never stops. Lights never truly go dark. The smell of sweat, disinfectant, and human waste lingers, no matter how often floors are scrubbed. Sleep becomes shallow. Tempers shorten. Every small irritation turns into a potential fight. For the men and women inside Twin Towers, the jail stopped being a place of temporary detention. It became a test of endurance. Most inmates arrived thinking they would be there for days or weeks. Some stayed months. Others stayed years. Court delays, overcrowded dockets, and lack of mental health placements trapped people in legal limbo. They were not serving sentences. They were waiting. Waiting to be transferred. Waiting to be seen. Waiting to be heard. Waiting became its own punishment. The building itself seemed to fight back. Elevators broke down regularly, forcing deputies to move inmates through stairwells that echoed with shouting and metal doors slamming. Plumbing failed under constant use. Toilets overflowed. Showers flooded. When water shutoffs happened, entire housing units went hours without basic sanitation. In a crowded jail, even a small infrastructure failure becomes a crisis. Correctional deputies were stretched thin. One deputy might be responsible for dozens, sometimes hundreds, of inmates. Control was maintained through routine and authority, but routine breaks down under pressure. When fights erupted, response time slowed. When medical emergencies happened, help did not always arrive fast enough. Deputies were forced to choose which problems to address first, knowing every choice left another situation unattended. Twin Towers did not just house criminals. It housed the mentally ill, the addicted, the homeless, and the forgotten. As state hospitals closed and community mental health funding dried up, jails became the last stop. Twin Towers became one of the largest mental health facilities in the country, not because it was designed to be, but because nowhere else would take these people. Cells filled with men talking to voices no one else could hear. Others paced endlessly, unable to sleep, unable to calm down. Some smeared feces on the walls. Some screamed through the night. Overcrowding magnified mental illness. There were not enough clinicians, not enough beds, not enough time. Treatment became triage. For inmates without mental illness, the environment was still brutal. Violence became unpredictable. Over a missing blanket, a look held too long, a rumor whispered in the wrong ear. When bodies are packed together, personal space disappears, and without space, dignity disappears with it. Respect becomes a currency more valuable than commissary. Lose it, and you pay in blood. Gang politics followed inmates inside, but overcrowding scrambled traditional lines. Rivals were sometimes housed together because there was nowhere else to put them. Deputies tried to separate hostile groups, but classification systems collapsed under sheer volume. Mistakes happened. People were hurt. Some were killed. Every day inside Twin Towers followed a rhythm shaped by confinement. Early morning counts, loudspeaker announcements echoing through concrete corridors. Food trays slid through slots, often cold by the time they arrived. Recreation, when allowed, meant standing in a concrete yard surrounded by high walls and razor wire, staring at a slice of sky that felt impossibly far away. The psychological toll was relentless. Overcrowding removed any sense of control. You could not choose when to sleep, when to eat, when to be alone. You could not escape noise. You could not escape people. Even silence, when it came, felt dangerous, like the calm before something worse. Some inmates tried to disappear, keeping their heads down, avoiding attention. Others adapted by becoming aggressive, projecting strength as armor. A few broke entirely. Suicide attempts increased. Self-harm became a way to feel something other than helplessness. Each incident added to the burden on staff already overwhelmed. Outside the jail, lawsuits piled up. Civil rights groups documented conditions. Reports described overcrowding, violence, medical neglect, and unsanitary living spaces. Judges issued warnings. Federal oversight loomed. County officials promised reform. New plans, new facilities, new funding. But inside Twin Towers, change came slowly, if at all. For the people living there, promises meant nothing. What mattered was the next hour, the next meal, the next night. Survival became a skill learned quickly or not at all. The building was never meant to carry this weight. Concrete cracked under constant use. Systems failed because they were pushed beyond design. But the true failure was human. A city that relied on incarceration to solve problems it did not want to face. A system that treated jail as a warehouse instead of a last resort. Twin Towers stood as a symbol of that failure. Not just a jail, but a mirror reflecting everything broken outside its walls. Poverty, mental illness, addiction, inequality. When those problems were locked away, instead of addressed, they did not disappear. They multiplied. And inside those towers, thousands of people paid the price every single day. This is where the story truly begins, not with the building, but with the lives trapped inside it, and the system that allowed it to become a place where humans were packed. Like animals, waiting for something to give. That if overcrowding crushed the structure of Twin Towers, it shattered the minds inside it. Long before the cells filled beyond capacity, Los Angeles County made a quiet decision, one that would redefine the jail forever. When state hospitals closed and long-term psychiatric facilities vanished, the mentally ill did not disappear with them. They were arrested, they were booked, and they were sent to Twin Towers. Slowly, without any formal declaration, the jail became one of the largest mental health institutions in the United States. But it was never designed to be one. Inside Twin Towers, mental illness was not treated in calm rooms with trained specialists and time to heal. It was managed behind steel doors, under fluorescent lights that never fully dimmed, surrounded by shouting, banging, and constant motion. For people already struggling to distinguish reality from delusion, the environment did not just worsen their condition, it weaponized it. Entire housing units became de facto psychiatric wards. Men suffering from schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, severe depression, and untreated trauma were packed together, often 2 or 3 to a cell meant for one. Some inmates screamed through the night, convinced someone was coming to kill them. Others sat motionless for hours, staring at walls they believed were speaking. A few paced endlessly, wearing paths into the concrete floor. Correctional deputies were not trained therapists. Their job was security, not treatment. Yet they became the first responders to psychiatric crises, talking inmates down from suicide attempts, breaking up psychotic episodes, restraining people who no longer understood where they were or why. Every shift carried the possibility of someone losing their grip on reality completely. Medication, when available, arrived inconsistently. Overcrowding strained pharmacy systems just like everything else. Missed doses were common. Changes in prescriptions took weeks. Some inmates learned how to fake symptoms just to receive sedatives, while others who desperately needed medication were overlooked because they were quiet, compliant, invisible. The quiet ones were often the most at risk. In a place like Twin Towers, survival favors the loud and aggressive. Those who withdraw, who retreat inward, can disappear without anyone noticing until something goes terribly wrong. Deputies would conduct counts and find inmates unresponsive, curled on metal bunks, having starved themselves or overdosed on hoarded pills. Some survived, some didn't. Suicide attempts became a grim routine. Bedsheets torn into strips, plastic utensils sharpened into blades, jump attempts from upper tiers. Each incident triggered lockdowns, investigations, paperwork, and then life moved on. For the inmates left behind, it was just another reminder that pain was constant and help was limited. Overcrowding turned every mental health crisis into a security risk. When someone had a breakdown, it didn't happen in isolation. It happened in packed day rooms, narrow corridors, crowded cells. One person screaming could set off an entire unit. Fear spread fast. Violence followed. Deputies rushed in wearing protective gear, using force not because they wanted to, but because the situation had already spiraled out of control. Restraints became common. Chairs, handcuffs, isolation cells. These measures were supposed to be temporary, used only until someone calmed down. In practice, people stayed restrained longer than intended because there was nowhere else to put them. Overcrowding eliminated alternatives. Isolation was its own kind of torture. Windowless cells, minimal human contact, meals slid through slots, lights that stayed on day and night. For inmates with mental illness, isolation did not bring clarity. It brought hallucinations, paranoia, and despair. Many came out worse than they went in. Physical health suffered alongside mental health. Overcrowding meant medical staff were overwhelmed. Appointments were rushed or postponed. Chronic conditions went untreated. Inmates with diabetes missed insulin doses. Asthmatics waited too long for inhalers. Minor injuries became serious infections. Serious conditions became fatal. The mentally ill were especially vulnerable. They struggled to advocate for themselves. They missed sick call forms. They failed to follow complex procedures required to receive care. In a system already overloaded, those who could not navigate bureaucracy simply fell through the cracks. Some inmates learned quickly that showing vulnerability was dangerous. They masked symptoms. They stayed silent. They avoided attention. But suppressing mental illness in an environment like Twin Towers was like holding your breath underwater. Eventually, you surfaced, whether you wanted to or not. Violence inside the jail was not always about gangs or power. Sometimes it was confusion, fear, a hallucination misinterpreted as a threat, a delusion that someone else was part of a conspiracy. When these moments happened in overcrowded spaces, consequences were immediate and severe. Deputies faced their own breaking points. Long shifts, constant noise, endless crises. Many entered the job expecting order and authority. Instead, they found chaos and moral injury. They watched people deteriorate in front of them, knowing there were no resources to fix it. Burnout was inevitable. Some became detached. Others became angry. A few crossed lines they should never have crossed. Reports began to surface. Lawsuits described inmates beaten during psychotic episodes. Others detailed neglect, prolonged isolation, and preventable deaths. Investigations confirmed patterns. inadequate staffing, insufficient training, overcrowding beyond control. Judges ordered reforms. Monitors were appointed. Timelines were set. Inside Twin Towers, little seemed to change. The jail's role as a mental health warehouse continued because there was nowhere else to send people. Hospitals refused inmates deemed too violent. Psychiatric beds were scarce. Community programs were underfunded. The jail absorbed the overflow by default. For inmates cycling in and out, Twin Towers became a revolving door. Arrest, detention, release, rearrest. Each stay made conditions worse. Each stay chipped away at stability. Eventually, jail was no longer a temporary disruption. It became the center of life. Families watched from the outside, powerless. Phone calls revealed fragments of suffering. Missed medication, fights, fear, confusion. Visits were limited. Information was scarce. When something went wrong, families often found out too late. Overcrowding turned Twin Towers into a place where the mind often broke long before the body did. Even those who entered mentally stable felt the strain. Anxiety, paranoia, insomnia, depression, these became universal experiences. The jail reshaped personalities. It hardened some. It destroyed others. By the time inmates were released, many were worse than when they entered. Untreated trauma followed them back into the streets. Without support, without medication, without stability, reoffending became almost inevitable. The system created the very cycle it claimed to prevent. Twin Towers was no longer just a jail holding people accused of crimes. It was a factory of psychological damage, producing outcomes that extended far beyond its walls. Every breakdown inside echoed outside, in emergency rooms, shelters, courtrooms, and graves. And still, the population kept growing, because as long as society continued to lock away problems, instead of solving them, Twin Towers remained the place where those problems were stored, stacked, and forgotten, until the pressure became impossible to ignore. In Twin Towers, violence was not always chaos. Often it was communication. When overcrowding reached its breaking point, rules changed. Official policies still existed on paper, but inside the housing units, a different system governed daily life. One built on reputation, fear, and survival. In a place where space was scarce and protection limited, violence became a form of currency. It bought safety. It bought respect. Sometimes it bought time. Every inmate learned this lesson quickly. The first days inside Twin Towers were the most dangerous. New arrivals stepped into an environment already in motion, already tense. There was no slow adjustment period, no orientation that could prepare someone for the constant noise, the compressed bodies, the watchful eyes, measuring weakness. Inmates were assessed immediately, by gangs, by predators, by those simply looking for an advantage in a place with very few. Overcrowding made segregation difficult. Classification systems were overwhelmed. Rival groups were housed together not because it was safe, but because there was nowhere else to put them. Deputies did their best to separate known enemies, but mistakes were inevitable. And in Twin Towers, a mistake could mean blood on the floor within minutes. Fights broke out over territory that barely existed. A bunk, a seat at a table, a spot near a fan. In normal circumstances, these would be trivial disputes. In a packed jail, they were matters of survival. Losing ground meant becoming vulnerable. Vulnerability invited exploitation. Some inmates adopted violence as a shield. A single brutal act early on could establish a reputation that prevented future attacks. Others aligned themselves with groups for protection, even if it meant surrendering autonomy. Refusing to choose sides was itself a choice, often the most dangerous one. Weapons were improvised from anything available. Toothbrushes melted and sharpened. Pieces of metal broken from fixtures. Pens, trays, even fragments of concrete. Overcrowding ensured these weapons circulated quickly. When hundreds of people share limited space, nothing stays hidden for long. Deputies patrolled constantly, but they were outnumbered. Searches found weapons, but more were always being made. Confiscation reduced supply temporarily, never permanently. Violence adapted. It always does. Medical units bore the consequences. Stab wounds, broken jaws, eye injuries, internal bleeding. Some inmates refused treatment, fearing retaliation if they were seen cooperating. Others exaggerated injuries to escape hostile units, hoping medical housing would be safer. Overcrowding blurred the line between genuine emergencies and strategic self-harm. Retaliation was a constant threat. A fight rarely ended with the initial blow. It triggered a chain reaction. Alliances activated, debts incurred. Scores settled days or weeks later. Inmates learned to sleep lightly, backs against walls, eyes open to sounds that signaled danger. For some, violence became routine. It numbed them. When fights happened daily, they stopped being shocking. They became background noise, like the clanging of doors or the shouting of counts. Desensitization spread. Empathy faded. Survival demanded emotional distance. Deputies faced impossible choices. Intervene too aggressively, and they risked accusations of excessive force. Intervene too slowly, and inmates were seriously injured or killed. Overcrowding forced deputies to triage violence the same way medical staff triaged illness, address the most severe cases first, and hope the rest didn't escalate. Lockdowns became frequent. Entire floors were confined to cells for hours or days after major incidents. These lockdowns increased tension rather than reducing it. Frustration built. Anger fermented. When doors finally opened, violence often followed. Gang influence shaped much of the conflict, but not all of it. Some violence was spontaneous, born of exhaustion, fear, and psychological strain. Sleep deprivation made tempers fragile. Constant noise eroded patience. The inability to escape others amplified every irritation. In a crowded cell, there was no way to cool off. Arguments had nowhere to go. Silence was impossible. When emotions boiled over, they exploded. Sexual violence existed as well, though it was rarely discussed openly. Overcrowding created opportunities for exploitation. Fear kept victims quiet. Reporting assaults carried risks, retaliation, isolation, disbelief. Many chose silence, absorbing trauma that would follow them long after release. Protective custody units filled quickly, but space there was limited too. Some inmates requested protection not because of specific threats, but because general population had become unbearable. Being surrounded by constant aggression wore people down faster than physical confinement ever could. The effects reached beyond inmates. Deputies carried the stress home. Some developed anxiety, depression, or substance abuse issues. Relationships suffered. Burnout rates climbed. A workforce stretched thin cannot provide stability, no matter how committed individuals may be. Investigations into violence at Twin Towers painted a consistent picture. Overcrowding was the catalyst. When too many people are forced into too little space, conflict is inevitable. No amount of policy reform could fully offset that reality. Yet the population remained high. Courts moved slowly. Bail systems favored those with money. Pretrial detention kept people locked up not because they were dangerous, but because they were poor. Twin Towers became a holding pen for inequality, where freedom depended less on guilt or innocence and more on financial means. For inmates awaiting trial, violence felt especially cruel. They had not been convicted of anything, yet they navigated the same dangers as sentenced prisoners. Some left with scars, physical and psychological, that would shape their lives forever, regardless of verdicts. Every act of violence inside Twin Towers rippled outward. Court cases delayed. Medical costs rose. Lawsuits mounted. Public trust eroded. The jail consumed resources while producing suffering in return. Still, it continued to function day after day, not because it worked, but because it had to. There was no alternative ready to replace it. No system prepared to absorb the people inside. And so violence remained the language of Twin Towers, a language learned quickly, spoken fluently, and paid for with blood. A language born not from inherent cruelty, but from a system that forced humans into conditions where survival demanded it. By the time inmates left, many carried that language with them, translating it into life on the outside, where the consequences no longer stayed behind bars. Twin Towers did not fail suddenly. It failed slowly, predictably, and in plain sight. For years, warnings stacked up like case files no one wanted to read. Federal judges criticized conditions. Civil rights organizations released damning reports. Former inmates described the same patterns again and again: overcrowding, neglect, violence, untreated mental illness. County officials acknowledged the problems publicly while struggling to contain them privately. Reform plans were announced. Task forces were formed. Budgets were debated. Inside the jail, nothing felt different. The population remained too high. The infrastructure remained overused. The pressure never eased. Deaths inside Twin Towers became impossible to ignore. Some were ruled suicides. Others were overdoses, untreated illnesses, or complications from injuries sustained in fights. Each death triggered investigations, press releases, and promises. Each one also revealed the same underlying truth. The system was operating beyond its limits, and people were dying as a result. Families demanded answers. Lawsuits accused the county of deliberate indifference. Judges threatened federal takeovers. Monitors documented repeated failures to meet basic standards of care. Twin Towers was no longer just a local embarrassment. It became a national symbol of what happens when incarceration replaces social services. Eventually, even county leadership had to concede what inmates and staff had known for years. Twin Towers was not sustainable. The decision to close parts of the facility did not come from a sudden moral awakening. It came from inevitability. The building was too damaged. Staffing shortages were too severe. Legal pressure was too intense. The cost, financial and human, had become too high to ignore. But closing a jail of that size was not simple. Thousands of inmates had to be moved. Some were transferred to other facilities already struggling with overcrowding. Others were released under supervision. The system shifted, but it did not heal. Problems were redistributed, not resolved. For the people who had lived inside Twin Towers, closure came too late. Many carried lasting trauma, nightmares, hypervigilance, distrust of authority. The habits learned inside, constant alertness, emotional shutdown, readiness for violence, did not disappear at the gate. They followed people home, into relationships, workplaces, and streets. Former inmates described difficulty adjusting to silence, to open spaces, to choices. Some slept on floors because beds felt unsafe. Others avoided crowds, triggered by the same compression that once defined their lives. Mental illness, untreated or worsened by incarceration, continued without support. Correctional deputies faced their own reckoning. Years spent in crisis mode left scars. Some retired early. Others transferred. A few stayed, carrying the weight of what they had witnessed. Things that could not be undone, only remembered. Twin Towers became a case study. Academics dissected it. Politicians referenced it. Activists used it as evidence. It stood as proof that jails cannot be asked to absorb society's failures without consequences. Overcrowding does not simply strain systems. It transforms them into something dangerous. And yet, the forces that created Twin Towers never fully disappeared. Poverty still leads to incarceration. Mental illness still funnels people into jails instead of treatment. Bail systems still punish the poor. Communities still lack resources. When these issues remain unresolved, new Twin Towers emerge under different names in different cities, repeating the same cycle. The story of Twin Towers is not just about one jail in Los Angeles. It is about a philosophy that confinement can substitute for care, that containment equals safety, that problems can be locked away until forgotten. Twin Towers prove the opposite. What is ignored does not vanish. It builds pressure. Inside those concrete walls, humans were packed beyond capacity, not because there was no alternative, but because alternatives were neglected. Every overcrowded cell was a decision. Every untreated illness was a choice. Every violent outbreak was a consequence. When Twin Towers finally began to empty, the building lost its voice, but the echoes remained. In courtrooms, in emergency rooms, in neighborhoods where former inmates tried to rebuild lives shaped by confinement. The cost of overcrowding did not end with closure. It spread outward, touching people who never set foot inside. Twin Towers stands as a warning written in concrete and steel, a reminder that systems designed without humanity eventually consume it. That when jails become warehouses, everyone pays, those inside, those working there, and the society that allowed it to happen. This was never just a jail. It was a mirror, and what it reflected is a question that still hasn't been answered. How many people must break before a system admits it was broken from the start?